I'm back with Mental Health Chats, and today I'm really excited because I've got Dr. Steve Boorman with us. Hello, Dr. Steve Boorman, how are you?
Hello, Claire. Thank you very much. And thank you for asking about my health. Unfortunately, I've not been very well recently, so I'm a very good example of sick presence in terms of somebody who's at work, but actually is a bit wheezy, has got a cough, and is only firing on 6 of the 12 cylinders. But I think this is such an important topic that I'm very keen to contribute.
Thank you so much for being very keen. And would you like to just tell everyone where you're based so that we know where you're based, first of all?
Well, that's a slightly strange question. I work mainly from home nowadays as a self-employed consultant. But over the 35 years of my career as a specialist in occupational medicine, the specialty that deals with work and health, I've led major national services, some of them employing teams of 500 and having turnovers of tens of millions of pounds. I've worked literally in every geographical region in the UK. I've worked in large businesses, small businesses, public services, private businesses, and in most industry sectors. But the unusual thing is that occupational medicine is often regarded as a breakdown specialty, somewhere you get sent to when you're underperforming or there's a problem. And my career has been working at a strategic level with boards, leaders and managers on the role that happy, healthy staff can play in keeping your business successful. And I've also worked as a strategic advisor and continue to work as such for the Department of Work and Pensions, Department of Health, the Joint Work and Health Unit, NHS England, and what was latterly Public Health England.
That's why I've asked you for this topic, because it's the most important topic and being the last interview of the year. So what we're talking about today is how we're going to boost team retention. And the way that we can do that is by celebrating our achievements from the past year and setting goals for the next year. So thank you for that one, Dad, because you've got such a wide experience right across the UK on so many different levels. So what I'd like to ask you for, first of all, is what are the benefits of teams actually celebrating what they've achieved in the past year?
I think this is something that's absolutely vital, and the successful businesses that I've worked with always do this, and they always take opportunity to take stock and to share their success with their teams. And I think the problem of recent years, and particularly the challenges of the current financial and competitive business environment, is that this often gets lost and forgotten, and is often thought of as unnecessary. And I guess a few simple case studies would probably help. So before I did medicine, I was a mechanic, and I've always been a Formula One nut. And you don't actually have to be interested in motorsport to understand that the Formula One team is actually a very complex team. It isn't just about the driver and the leader of that team. It's actually about the person who wipes the dust off the front of the car. It's actually about the designer. It's people back in the factory, the builders, the physio, the psychologist. Absolutely multiple moving parts to actually be successful in Formula One. And again, you don't need to have gone to a Grand Prix. You just need to have watched the news and see how teams celebrate when they actually end up on the podium. And I can tell you from having gone to many Formula One events and actually been the guests of some team, that celebration goes on long into the night and into the next morning. And yet they then pick everything up and get on with the next bit of the job, which is delivering on target to be at the next race and to be competitive and successful. And it's absolutely integral to their business model that's important in terms of rewarding the team. Another case example is a very personal one. It's me. I said I worked in very large businesses, most of whom did celebrate success. But 3.5 years ago, or 4.5 years ago now, when the pandemic started, a series of family events meant that I became a single-handed consultant and decided to work from home. And last year, I began to recognise that things that normally were very easy to do actually have become quite tough. And I knew I wasn't achieving the quality that actually is important to me in my job. And on the same day, I had calls from two colleagues. I chair an organisation called the Council for Work and Health, and we have a specialist mental health subgroup with leaders of many of the leading organisations on it. And coincidentally, I took calls that day from two of the specialists, and both of them said to me, "Are you okay, Steve?" And I thought that was slightly strange. And after the calls, I stood back and I recognised that actually I hadn't understood both the impacts of working alone, but also not celebrating success. And I went out the next week and I bought myself a dream car, actually the Formula One Medics car, and I bought myself a puppy, a beautiful Labrador. And a couple of weeks later, I was working and I was doing one of those routine, repetitive tasks, and I realised I'd actually done it in half the time. And I realised that actually I was looking out the window at the car, and I had a Labrador curled up at my feet, and I was enjoying the job again.
Yeah.
And on the next day, two of my best clients, senior clients, rang me up and said, "Look, we just want to say we have always appreciated what you do, but actually this last few weeks, actually what you've given us is excellent." And it was, you know, I realised that what I've been preaching and teaching actually is personal as well at the end of the day.
Definitely is. And I love both of those stories because it's so, so important that we value our people and we value our people at all levels. And that actually goes with, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I'm absolutely with you, Claire. And in 2009, I was invited by the Health Secretary to do a formal independent review looking at the role health plays on productivity, patient care, and performance against regulatory targets across the health service. And we were able to get some very objective data about high-performing teams and less well-performing teams. And sometimes that was down to the demographics and the demands on them. But comparing like for like, we did a whole series of focus groups, interviews, and data gathering exercises. And the higher performing teams simply said, "We feel respected and valued, and our managers say thank you." And the lower performance, the lower performance teams said, "I actually haven't had a one-to-one with my manager in the last 3 years."
Really?
Yeah.
That is the proof of the pudding, and that goes with our staff retention. And when I coach leaders, what I'm coaching them on, especially at the moment, is making sure they are having goals to retain their teams for the upcoming year. It's so, so important. And you've just given a brilliant example there. We've got to have regular one-to-ones. We've got to have regular check-ins. We've got to value our people. But what other strategies would you recommend to help leaders retain their teams for the upcoming year?
I think the basic first thing is to recognise how important it is, particularly as we're going through a very tough recovery in businesses, and businesses have been quite hurt by all that's gone on and are trying to trade in very difficult conditions. So unless you actually monitor retention and attraction and actually have a KPI and a goal set around it, then actually what isn't measured doesn't get done.
Yes.
And the second thing is actually to encourage them to recognise how costly it is to lose people, because you often lose your most experienced staff and the staff that have cost you a lot of money and are doing stuff, because they're the ones that are capable of voting with their feet. And there are times where you want to lose people, you want to downsize, but it's often your best people that actually go. And another anecdote, and a true one, having had health problems, I rely very heavily on the delivery drivers. And about a few months ago, my delivery driver was an unfamiliar face. And I was trying to just establish a rapport. And I said, "Hi, I haven't seen you before. Is this a new role?" And he said to me, "Yes, I was an ambulance man paramedic for 19 and a half years.
Wow.
And I have changed jobs, and I now drive a van for the supermarket." And he didn't know who I was, but I invited him in and totally destroyed his delivery schedule. And he told me a very familiar story, and it's familiar because I've heard it from many NHS staff. And actually, my own father experienced it when he spent 8 hours in the back of an ambulance to do a 1.5 mile journey on his final illness. And the ambulance man said, look, I trained as a paramedic, I care, I've done a good job over the years, and my job is to assess, provide immediate care, pick up and drop off as quickly as possible. I didn't train to spend 8 or 10 hours in the back of an ambulance trying to work as an intensive care nurse. And I didn't train actually to see so many people actually lose their lives in my ambulance. And I didn't train to have junior members of my staff in tears because we've been outside the hospital for 12 hours. And he said, by moving jobs, actually, I drive a similar size vehicle, but now I'm in control. He said, I can give customer satisfaction. I can spend time talking to people like yourself, and I know I'm giving a good service. The loss of that man's experience to the health service is horrendous. And unfortunately, that's the attrition that we are facing at the moment across many businesses.
It is across many businesses, and unfortunately, it is across the health service.
Yeah. So you said, what can leaders do? I think the first thing is that they need to be visible.
Yeah.
They don't need to be in a C-suite issuing commands from afar that basically people find very difficult. They need to have contact with their people at all levels. And they need to use that contact not just to talk or talk at, but to actually listen. And hearing what is needed is really important. And then that needs to translate into action. And what I mean by that is that actually people need to see that the person that they talk to has taken it back, has thought about it, and is doing something. At my wedding, the one sensible thing that my mother-in-law said, because she doesn't like Englishmen and doctors, was the hope prayer, which is very simply, Lord, give me the courage to make changes that I can, to accept the things that I can't, and to have the wisdom to recognise the difference. And the other thing I think that's important for leaders is that sometimes there will be things they can't change, but they do need to go back, and they do need to actually explain and give a valid rationale as to why they can't make that difference, and what can we do to mitigate this situation.
You've said so many valuable things there, and one of the key things that I am forever saying when I'm coaching my clients is the listening. The listening's key, but I love the fact that you have put on the action and the communication if you cannot act upon it. And that's one of my mother's favourite prayers as well. So thank you for reminding me of that. And it's so important that leaders do motivate their teams, especially when we've got a new year, we've got new goals, we're setting new goals with them. So what can leaders do to actually set those goals, but also motivate their teams throughout the year to achieve the goals? We don't just want to set the goals at the beginning of the year and forget about them. We need to motivate our teams to achieve them. So what can they do?
I completely agree with you. And I think the other thing is that people leave organisations because they don't fit with the culture. And leaders create the culture and the conditions that actually make a place where you want to be and where you want to deliver highly.
Definitely. It's all down to the culture. And that's why I love the positive intelligence coaching that I do, because it really does impact the culture, and it helps the culture work together. It helps them build relationships. It helps them with their well-being, but it also helps them increase their performance. And the culture is absolutely key. So I think one of the goals of leaders for this year should be, what are we going to do to change the culture so that we can motivate our teams and retain our teams and listen to them and actually communicate better with them? Definitely. So you have said so much there, Steve. Thank you so much for your wise words. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think there's one other thing, and I think often we expect managers and leaders to do this stuff intuitively, and quite often they get their positions because of their technical skills
Yes.
and experience and seniority, rather than because they're people.
Yes.
And they forget that actually the warm breathing thing is just as important as the piece of factory machinery or the IT kit at the end of the day.
Definitely.
So it is about time. It is about setting very clear goals and expectations with their teams, doing that in dialogue, but being prepared to change if things aren't working.
Steve, you've said so much today. You've been amazing, and that's why when I met you, I thought I want you on my podcast. You are amazing, and I love the fact that you have just reiterated that our biggest asset is our people, and we need to value our people. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who would like to get in touch with you. So where can we find you?
So I'm relatively easy to find on LinkedIn. My business email is sboorman@empactis, empactis.com, and I always respond.
You are amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Steve Boorman, and take care.
Thank you.